And we are back. Thank you for joining us. This is the InfoWars Nightly News. And once again, I'm your host, Darrin McBreen. And coming up next, we are going to take a look at the new powerful documentary film, The Greater Good. And this takes a look at the government's vaccination policies. And, well, it's an amazing must-see documentary. It's winning film festivals all across the country as well as internationally. I watched it for the first time earlier this week, and I personally think it's one of the best documentary films that I have ever seen. And this is the perfect tool that we can use not only to educate, but to affect change as well. The DVD is available right there at InfoWarsShop.com. We're going to take a look at the trailer right now. This is the official trailer, and here's a sneak peek at The Greater Good on the InfoWars Nightly News.
2 years ago, a vaccine completely changed my life. I would do anything to get my life back to normal.
History teaches us how effective vaccines are.
Vaccines are the best choice for almost all children.
I don't think it's that black and white.
Vaccines in some way have been a victim of their own success.
The government, they're trying to protect society, but these motivations interfere with, safety issues.
In the last 3 decades, the numbers of doses of vaccines have more than tripled.
We are seeing a rise in the number of children with disabilities.
What if these shots that are supposed to protect kids actually hurt your child?
After the shots, I started getting sick. I've had 2 strokes, partial paralysis, partial vision, and I'm having seizures.
I would have never dreamt that this was a side effect of a vaccine.
Many of these have the potential to be neurotoxic.
The research is incomplete, and the certainty is not scientific.
A number of prescription drugs that have been licensed as safe have been found to be unsafe.
The social fabric, it is better to insist on vaccination than to allow free rein.
The people who are approving the vaccines are taking the word of the pharmaceutical companies. The majority of vaccine research is paid for by the vaccine manufacturers themselves.
We're the only country other than New Zealand that allows advertising on TV for pharmaceutical drugs.
You can't sue the drug company that made the vaccine.
That's not science, that's politics.
Texas Governor Rick Perry has ordered that schoolgirls must get the Gardasil shot.
We can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way.
The only thing that we oppose is forced vaccination.
Sadly, some people don't do what's best for their children unless it's mandated.
We're not zealots. We're not some people that are looking for a conspiracy or a fight.
The vaccine program, it's one size fits all.
We worry about the future.
You could have 30, 40, 50 different vaccines mandated and absolutely no accountability. You have a prescription for disaster.
I have a child, and then I follow the rules, and I damage this child. That's hard for me to understand.
I just want everybody to lay down their arms and figure out what is making them so sick.
Show us the science and give us the choice.
And we are joined now by Leslie Manookian, who is the writer and producer of this film. And Leslie, right out of the gate, let me just say congratulations on a job well done. It's truly an amazing documentary, and we're excited and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Well, tell us about the film, break down some of the highlights, and tell us why it's a good idea for people to go see it.
Well, I think it would be a surprise to anybody that there's a vaccine debate raging in this country, and not just in this country, but around the world. And I didn't really understand the debate over 10 years ago. I thought that there was really nothing to it. But I was working on Wall Street, actually living in London and working in finance, and I met somebody who told me that vaccines could cause harm. And I thought, come on, this guy's nuts. I mean, he's got to be whacked. There's something wrong with him. But he gave me a book and he told me to read it. And in the back of the book, there were over 900 references to mainstream medical literature, studies published in peer-reviewed medical literature. And I thought, gosh, I really need to look into this more. And I vowed that one day after I read that book, I was going to go and figure this out for myself and look at these officials and talk to these people and look them in the eye. And I've been stunned to find out that we are actually in a situation where our kids are really sick. Over 50% of American children are chronically ill. 20% are developmentally disabled, and there's growing science that links it to vaccinations. Now, who would have thought that was the case? And I certainly wouldn't have 10 years ago when I first started thinking about this issue. But the science is mounting, and we're now seeing that there's really serious cause for concern. And so we made this film because we want people to understand that the whole vaccination conversation is a conversation worth having, that there is science out there that calls into question the safety of vaccines, and we need to explore this further so we can get to the bottom of what's causing our kids to be so sick. That's really the gist of it, and we just hope that more and more people will open their hearts and open their minds and understand that there may be something going on here that we really all should care about.
Well, I think this is the best vaccination film that I've ever seen, and I think we have something here that will not only educate people, but it'll also affect change as well, because this is really a splash-in-your-face wake-up call to everyone who sees it. Now, I want to play a few clips from the film. We're going to start out with a look at the rise of chronic illness as children with disabilities have now reached epidemic levels.
Is only one kind of brain and immune dysfunction that is associated with vaccination. Millions and millions of children now in America are chronically ill and disabled. And during the same time period, that the numbers of doses of vaccines have more than tripled that we're giving our children. We have seen this explosion of chronic disease and disability. And to take off the table the use of a pharmaceutical product like a vaccine as a potential cofactor in this explosion of chronic disease and disability among our children is irresponsible.
And that was Barbara Lowe Fisher. She is the president of the National Vaccine Information Center, also one of the many heroes that are featured in this amazing documentary, The Greater Good. Now, Barbara Lowe Fisher, she actually dedicated her life to this. Her son, unfortunately, fell victim to a vaccination some 30 years ago. He got the shot, he became brain damaged, and she became committed to reforming the vaccination system. Again, one of the many heroic and courageous people that are featured in this documentary. Now, tell us more about the chronic illness epidemic that we're facing right now. I mean, everywhere you look, there's children with disabilities.
Well, I don't know how old you are, Darrin, but I'm 48 years old, and when I was a kid, I don't remember anybody being sick. There were no obese kids. There were no people with asthma. There were, if someone had asthma, it was extremely rare. I didn't know a single person with a peanut allergy or any kind of allergy for that matter. And today, we know from a study that was published in Academic Pediatrics last year that over 50% of American children have some kind of chronic illness or disability. So these are things like asthma, allergies, eczema, learning disabilities, speech delay, yes, autism, many other things, lupus, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, and things like this. We're even seeing these in kids nowadays. And what's interesting is that not only is there this explosion of chronic illness, but as I mentioned before in the introduction, there's actually science linking those things to the aluminum in vaccines, the mercury in vaccines, other components of vaccines, or just vaccines in general. And I think it's really critical, obviously, when you get to a point where over 50% of your kids have some chronic illness or disability, that we seriously take a hard look at this. And it's irresponsible for health authorities to be claiming that there is no connection anymore, because there's such a growing body of science suggesting that there is a link.
Well, I'm the same age as you are. I'm 45 years old, and the same with me. When I was grown up in school, it was very rare that anybody had a disability, and I went to some very big schools in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, here's something that I bet most people aren't aware of as well, but you are not allowed to sue the drug companies that manufacture the vaccines. So I guess we're finally living in the twilight zone. Big government has stepped in to protect big pharma. Meanwhile, our children remain unprotected. Here's another clip from The Greater Good.
The first thing that we learned is you can't sue the drug company that made the vaccine. Our lawyer explained to us how there was this court set up specifically to address all the vaccine injuries.
There were a lot of civil lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers. and there were some extraordinary awards because there were very devastating injuries. So the vaccine manufacturer said, this isn't profitable for us, we're not going to make vaccines anymore. So Congress stepped in and said, okay, we're going to stop lawsuits against manufacturers, and you're not allowed to sue them unless you first go through this new program that we're setting up called the Vaccine Compensation Program, or the Vaccine Court.
So the vaccine makers have immunity and are elected, or so-called elected officials, no doubt sold out. Meanwhile, they're trying to make vaccines mandatory, and they have no accountability, zero accountability. So, this is insane. Tell us about how they set up the court system in favor or to protect Big Pharma.
Well, essentially what happened was in the early 1980s, many children were killed by the DPT vaccine or suffered permanent brain damage from the DPT vaccine. And Britain actually did a study called the National Childhood Encephalopathy Study that found out that this is what was happening, that this DPT, the diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus vaccine was causing a tremendous amount of harm to children. And so the United States did a follow-up and found out that, yes, indeed, this was happening. And what happened was all these parents went and sued, and there were huge payouts. And so the pharmaceutical industry basically threatened the government and said, we'll stop making vaccines if you don't start protecting us. Rather than making safer products, they threatened the government, and the government actually went along with it, essentially. And what happened was Ronald Reagan signed into law something called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. And this law was supposed to make it easy for parents who'd had their children be injured by vaccines, make it easy for them to go and apply for compensation. But what's happened in the last 25 years since it came to be is that the table of compensable events has been gutted so that it's almost impossible to get compensated now. And what happened was they set up this program, which people call the Vaccine Court, where you actually have to go to if you want to claim that your child was injured by a vaccine. And the court and the whole trust fund that pays out to the families is funded by a tax that is actually levied on every single vaccine that's given in America. So people don't realize when you take your kid in to get them vaccinated, there's a 75-cent tax on every vaccination. And that 75 cents goes into this trust fund that then pays out to you or somebody else if their child is injured by a vaccine. And while the idea was that it would help make it a no-fault system, what's happened is it's just been completely corrupted in the last 25 years. And so now we've gotten to a point where the pharmaceutical industry bears zero liability. And in fact, last year, the Supreme Court ruled that even if the vaccine makers could have made a safer vaccine, you can't even sue in civil court anymore. So there is actually zero recourse. You go to the vaccine court, if you don't get any kind of suitable response, you have no other options. And as far as I know, there's no other product in the world today for which the maker bears zero liability. I mean, what incentive do they have to actually create a safer product when they have no liability? And so now we're facing a situation where literally there are hundreds of new vaccines under development and they have no liability. I mean, it's just insanity.
Yeah, we've got all these new vaccines under development, and now they have fast tracking, which is the FDA's process of speeding up the drug trials in order to get these vaccinations out there and into the public in a hurry. In fact, we have another clip. Let's play the fast tracking clip. This is about the fast tracking of Gardasil. Let's take a look.
The FDA has a particular process that's called fast tracking when there is a promising drug that comes forward. Gardasil, they had scheduled a 4-year trial, but after 15 months, they went to the FDA and said, there is nothing like this vaccine on the market. Would you please consider this for fast track? And the FDA said yes. So within 6 months, they approved it. And as soon as they had it approved, Merck said, we will no longer continue our trial. We're going to stop our trial because our drug is now approved. So therefore, we don't know the long-term side effects. We do know there have been reports of pancreatitis, reports of autoimmune disease, reports of transverse myelitis, and reports of juvenile ALS, which is uniformly fatal in adolescents.
And that was another scene from the explosive documentary, The Greater Good, which is available at InfoWarsShop.com. You can also purchase the DVD at GreaterGoodMovie.org. And Leslie, I know you're aware that here in Texas, we have Governor Rick Perry, the corrupted slimeball imbecile that he is. He actually made it mandatory. He had all the schools, he said all the schools have to give Gardasil shots. And lo and behold, we learn that he indeed has connections to the pharmaceutical industry. So there's a blatant conflict of interest here. And I wanted to get your take on not just with Rick Perry, but the revolving door that we seem to have between the pharmaceutical industry and federal agencies.
It is something that's very troubling. What Rick Perry did was amazing. He actually signed an executive order decreeing that all kids should get this. Executive orders are for emergencies, not for something that's not even easily communicable. But what's really at stake here is that there is no firewall between the pharmaceutical industry, CDC, and FDA. And there's a problem with that, in that members of the committees who make decisions about which vaccines will and won't be recommended by the CDC actually are patent holders. They have a financial interest. They are consultants or direct employees of pharmaceutical industry, and they're making these decisions. And of course, they have a huge conflict of interest because they may actually have developed a vaccine themselves, and yet all they're asked to do is sign a waiver. And that's only been in the last 3 years. Before 3 years ago, they didn't even have to sign a waiver. All they had to do was nothing. But with public pressure, they had to sign a waiver each year. That doesn't actually stop them from participating in the discussions or even from voting. And it's no surprise that parents are not trusting these people when they know that there are these conflicts of interest. So that's something that's very worrying. And then when you even look at the very top, the former CDC director under George W. Bush, a woman named Dr. Julie Gerberding, when she finished her post at the CDC, when he left office, she did her 1 year cooling off period. And then guess what she did?
What's that?
Instantly, she became president of Merck Vaccines globally.
Okay.
I mean, you really have to ask yourself, what kinds of things was she doing when she was at CDC before she went to Merck in order to sort of pave the way for further vaccine use? And, this was during the time of Gardasil. So you really have to ask yourself.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but no, obviously it's a huge conflict of interest. But the good news is that, people are finally starting to wake up to this. Largely because of people like you and the wonderful families and activists that you featured in the documentary. Mm-hmm. And, I thought it was interesting when Dr. Robert Sears, he's the pediatrician that appeared in the film, and, he wrote the bestseller. It was, it's called The Vaccine Book, mm-hmm. Making the Right Decision for Your Child. He was advised by his colleagues, man, I wouldn't write the book if I were you, because they knew the kind of backlash that he would probably get from the mainstream medical industry, if you will. And but thankfully, he had the courage to write the book, and it became a bestseller, but not without tremendous backlash from the pharmaceutical industry and the mainstream media as well. After all, they pretty much go together hand in hand. But I thought, you must certainly be experiencing the same thing. What kind of a backlash have you received, even though your movie is critically acclaimed, it's winning awards all across the country and the world, but you must have witnessed some sort of backlash yourself?
Well, we have definitely, I personally have actually been subjected to some pretty nasty attacks online, in blogs and things like that, which are largely unfounded. People just going after crazy things. Most of these people, I believe, are bloggers who are paid by the pharmaceutical industry to try and discredit anyone who questions the safety of vaccines or other medical products. I don't think it's just about vaccines, but clearly vaccines are a sacred cow that are you don't go near without reaping some kind of negative backlash. And so my computer's crashed a lot. Somebody hacked into into our website and deleted all my emails.
Wow.
My phone's been tapped. And there's no doubt all sorts of strange things going on whenever I'm communicating. I sometimes hear people on the line, and if I say something like, I was having a conversation with someone I was about to do a radio interview with, and as I was speaking, I said to her, "Do you hear those voices?" I could hear two men's voices in the background, and as soon as I said it, instantly they stopped. And she said, "Yeah, I heard it too." And then there was just silence, and I'm assuming they just forgot to push mute or something.
Well, it's kind of spooky, but, and it didn't take me very long. I found a hit piece. I did a little bit of research, and there was a hit piece about the greater good. It was on the sciencebasedmedicine.org website. We talked earlier, David Gorski wrote it was a mean-spirited attack on the documentary, in my opinion. And come to find out, he has connections to the pharmaceutical industry and financial ties as well. So no doubt they're going to go after you. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry, and with that kind of money, no doubt, that's enough to buy a lot of corruption.
Well, the vaccine industry will probably do about $35 billion in revenues in the next year or two. So we're talking huge. And this is at a time when the pharmaceutical industry has no further blockbusters. Their blockbusters have all gone off patent. And so they've actually been experiencing flat to declining revenues. And that's a real problem for them. And given that they have no liability when it comes to vaccine manufacture, you can understand why it's such an appealing thing for them. And so I think that our film really threatens them more than anyone because of the fact that it's fair and balanced, because we show both sides, and we interviewed people who are extremely pro-vaccine, and then we interviewed people who have serious questions about vaccines, and we allow them to argue their cases, make their points, share their stories so that the viewer can then decide what they want to do. And I think that is much more threatening than a polemic, much more something that touches many more people and can open more people's hearts and minds, because they can actually make the choice for themselves who they choose to believe.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so effective, because it does show both sides. It's put together very well. It's real slick. It's got nice graphics, and, that's what we need in order to get the word out as well. And you have competition. I mean, you're going up against these Gardasil ads, for example, that appear on MTV. And so, it's nice to have something that we could get out there to the people. We need to get this to every doctor, every pediatrician, every nurse, force them to make the moral decision. And it wouldn't be a bad idea, obviously, to get this in the hands of expected mothers, any family who's getting ready to have a child or have children. They need to take a look at this as well, and they'll be glad that they did. Now, in closing, because we're almost out of time, I wanted you to talk about, basically what's next for the greater good. I understand you have screenings that are planned in several cities in the future, and talk about those, and then what's planned for the future.
So we're just going through a website relaunch. It'll be up, the new site, in another week or 2 weeks. And once that's up, people will be able to go and search online at greatergoodmovie.org to find out exactly where the screenings are going to be.
And you're going to take questions for the audience at these screenings as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
well,
awesome.
Essentially what's happening is we won't necessarily be at every single screening, but there will be people who are facilitating. So we've had over 1,000 people sign up who want to host screenings in their communities. And this might be at their church, it might be in their home, it might be at their school or their community center, but they all want to bring together their community so that they can talk about this really, really critical issue and why it is that so many of our kids are so sick. Help people to understand it's not black and white. We've all been led to believe it's black and white, that this issue is all done, and that's just not the case. And so they're going to bring people together to have these conversations. And we have, like I say, about 1,000 people signed up to do that. In addition to that, I'm going to a big libertarian festival, Freedom Fest, in Las Vegas in July, to go and appear there and show the film a couple of times, and to moderate a vaccine debate between two physicians. And those kinds of things are happening all the time. We won an award from the University of Alabama at Birmingham for our treatment of a critical issue to public health. And we've been invited to go there and do a big event there in the fall. So those kinds of things are happening, going to more universities, more festivals, and ultimately, hopefully, reaching every hospital and physicians. There was something that I'm most excited about was that at our own local film festival here in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I live, in March, a woman introduced the film who's involved with our local hospital. And she happens to be connected to a network of 50-some hospitals in the northwestern United States. And she's a medical consultant. She's also connected to about 80,000 doctors who are insured by this company that she consults with, an insurance company. And she wants to get the film to all those hospitals and also make it required viewing for those 80,000 doctors. So we're working on a program where we would get the film shown to all these physicians and to all these hospitals to help these medical professionals understand that this is something that warrants further investigation and that they may not know or understand the whole story. And can I just add one other thing on this, because I think it's really critical. The last 3 or 4 months, I've been working on compiling a catalog of science, and I'm almost complete, although it'll probably never complete because the science continues to grow. But at this point, I have over 160 papers that have been published in mainstream peer-reviewed medical journals that document unexplained infant death, autism, learning disabilities, rheumatoid arthritis, allergies, asthma, all these things after vaccinations or their components. And it also connects the dots for the layperson so people can understand that there's a body of science that connects neurological and immune damage, and there's a body of science that connects neurological, immune, and gut damage, and then the development of all those systems and their functioning. And so what I do is I go through and help people to understand how these things are connected, how much science there is, and why we need to do more work. And I'm really excited because I don't think this exists anywhere else in the world, and I really feel very strongly that this is going to be a tool that will be so effective in helping these medical professionals to understand why they need to open their minds and their hearts on this issue.
Wow, you are amazing. That's all. Well, I didn't think you were the kind of person that just make a documentary and then call it a day. I mean, obviously, this is the kind of thing that'll affect you for the rest of your life as well. So you're committed, and we applaud you for it. You're truly a hero in my book, along with all the wonderful families and the activists that appeared in the film, The Greater Good. Real quick, can those schedules you're talking about, I'd love to go see one of the debates. Maybe we can get a reporter out there in Vegas or something. Debates would be very interesting. Are all those schedules listed on the website?
If you go to Freedom Fest,
okay,
I think it's freedomfest.com. They should be on there.
Okay. All right, we'll check it out. Well, Leslie, thank you again for joining us. It's been awesome. I really look forward to having you on the show again sometime, hopefully in the near future. Until then, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Tehank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this critical issue.
Okay, take care. All right, and I'm not going to lie to you, folks. This is a tear jerker at times. There was one point where I literally had to stop the DVD and kind of compose myself because, like I said, it's very emotionally charged. And, you know, if this doesn't get you emotionally charged, then you don't have a soul, okay? You're not human. So, but the good news is that as sad as it is at times, it's also extremely empowering. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's because we finally have the tool we need right here to pass this along and wake people up and get them out of their trance. So the DVD is available on our website. It's InfoWarsShop.com. That's right. And you can also purchase it at the greatergood.org website. So get this out to doctors, pediatricians, nurses alike. Force them to make a moral decision. So that's going to do it for our broadcast. We will be back, God willing, next Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Until then, have a fantastic weekend, and I look forward to seeing you right here again next Monday. Good night.